Hello and welcome to another episode of On Background with Susan Crabtree. I'm Eric Eggers, pleased once again to be joined by award-winning journalist Susan Crabtree, who's going to help us learn about Secret Service, DEI, and we're going to ask a question, including to a high-ranking elected official, Susan. Does the Secret Service need to have happen to it what just happened to the Department of War?
Yes, that's basically what we're talking about here because Pete Hegseth, that's Secretary of War, is setting a very high bar and pressuring other agencies, especially the Secret Service, in light of the assassination attempts last year, to up their game and get rid of some of the woke policies that was so prevalent during the Biden administration.
Yeah, now you've got a latest incident, and we'll talk about that. Let's say it's an example of the Secret Service agents maybe not being fully fit for duty. And of course, it's the latest in a long line, and we'll kind of briefly recap, but we've had no fewer than 2 assassination attempts on President Trump last year, one of which in which he was actually injured by a bullet. And there's lots of questions still outstanding about that. But you've seen other indications that the Secret Service's performance has been failing. We're going to talk to Marsha Blackburn, senator from Tennessee, who's been leading the charge on trying to bring more accountability to that agency later in this episode. But what are you seeing now, and why, kind of put this into a context for it, why one incident after another kind of helps paint a picture of a larger issue that could be a very real problem for our national security?
Yes. So, of course, I respect the Secret Service. What they do is amazing. They're literally putting their lives on the line for our continuity of government, for President Trump, J.D. Vance, the cabinet. So I respect all the agents for doing so. But there has been ongoing problems. Sean Curran, the current director, inherited a big mess from Kimberly Cheadle from the Biden administration. She was handpicked by Jill Biden to lead the Secret Service, very close to the Biden family, and took their directive, their executive order, Biden's, to the hilt. It was a DEI order that was mandated at all federal levels to make this a huge priority, and she did so. She made it one of her top priorities. So basically, the threat-based and the security protective operations that the Secret Service is so well known for, and its mission, its zero-fail mission, sort of went by the wayside. To push this 30 by 30 pledge was one of what Cheetah was best known for. She wanted to have 30% women agents in the Secret Service, officers and agents, by 2030, the year 2030. And she was pretty successful. From what I understand, by the time she left, she had 24% of women agents at that level.
Now, Susan, can I ask you, are you aware of any, because the Secret Service obviously is an administrative component to it, but it is very much your job is to physically protect assets. Are you aware of any similar quotas existing in terms of we have to have this many women be hired in these ranks for similar lines of work? So we're not talking about white collar accounting work. We're talking about physically demanding. Does the military or any other law enforcement agencies have a similar quota that you're aware of?
Yes, the police departments across the country also ascribe to this 30 by 30 pledge. That's how it's a known pledge that's nationwide. And so Cheadle just sort of picked it up and elevated it to the federal level and to the Secret Service, which is, I think its mission is pretty darn important. And they did fail on her watch, and she was forced out of office for it. And so we've seen this series of incidents, I would call them. We haven't had a major assassination attempt on President Trump's life since Sean Curran took over, and I will give him
since last year. No big deal. Hey, congratulations.
So I mean, although the threat is very high against him, so the Iranians for sure are trying. So we got to give them some credit for that. But there have been a series of incidents that give great pause and are raising this DEI question again and again. And Hegseth is doing so well in recruitment at the Department of War now. it's really begs the question, why is the Secret Service not doing that? And I can go over some of those incidents. It's kind of disturbing. So one was recently at the end of September at the UN General Assembly. A African American, very overweight from the photos that I have, he fell asleep on the job, and he actually left his fully automatic rifle unattended while he went to the bathroom. So that was one. You also had earlier in May, at the end of May, you had two female Secret Service agents getting into a physical cat fight, what they called it. When it was hit the press, it went viral after I reported it, in front of former President Obama's residence.
Which, just to give it some context, Susan, like if there was video of police officers or members of the military fighting amongst themselves, and these are, so forget, there's that piece of it alone. But then it's like they're there literally to protect the former president of the United States, who you'd have to think, like, in certain conditions, Barack Obama might also face a not insignificant number of threats on his physical safety. So, I mean, it's comical and sad to think that these things happen for enlisted agents of the Secret Service.
Yeah, those were two uniformed division officers. So they're protective. They do have a protective role, obviously.
Yeah.
Do they mainly guard the White House? That's their role. And then agents have more an expanded role, and they do criminal investigations, all kinds of things. But there was other incidents that we'll go through. One of them was they missed a Glock at one of Donald Trump's golf courses. They screened somebody, and he got in through a bag. Luckily it was a member of Donald Trump's golf course in Sterling, Virginia. But that was recent, over Labor Day weekend. And you also had the Charlie Kirk assassination guy, the agent who celebrated Charlie Kirk's assassination. I think it was either the day of or the day afterwards. So he said something like, karma, you can't avoid karma. And he would also been posting a lot of pro-DEI statements on his Facebook posts. So all of this combined is begging the question, it's really having a harmful effect. I mean, I'm not a red-blooded American male, but Eric, I'll pass this one to you. I mean, what do you think effect do you think that has on recruitment? The Secret Service is known for having retention problems.
Well, it's a great question, and thank you for allowing me to be the spokesperson for all red-blooded American males on this podcast. If the shoe fits. But I will say we don't actually have to speculate, because your question, and then we'll ask Marsha Blackburn that question later on in this episode, does the Secret Service need to have what happened to the Department of War? Because we have seen evidence of similar decreases in terms of recruitment efforts and overall quality in the military. And you have somebody come in and have a fundamental sea change in terms of what we're going to prioritize, and you see the recruitment actually spike. So I didn't realize this, but in 2022, the military actually hit a 40-year low in terms of their recruitment efforts. It was the lowest since they stopped the draft in 1973. We had a 15,000 soldier shortfall in the Army. And so they started 2 years ago, or I think last year, and it's been a massive uptick since, of course, Donald Trump wins, Pete Hegseth takes over. There's been a whole rebranding effort. They get rid of these woke things. And the woke things, by the way, I mean, everything you just mentioned about the Secret Service and the 30 by 30, the military, the Naval Academy was including the book How to Be an Anti-Racist in the sailors' reading list. They had a gender-neutral physical fitness test in the Army that they had to get rid of, because even with the gender-neutral test, too many women were failing. The Air Force had a DEI training curriculum. They asked people to avoid using gender-neutral language. And then, of course, obviously in 2021, Lloyd Austin mandates the COVID vaccine for all active duty personnel. So a number of things under the Biden administration contributed to a lowering of morale and ultimately a lowering of recruitment. Again, hits that 40-year low. Then they come over and they just announced, as of, I think, earlier this month, the Navy has brought in the highest total of future sailors in over 2 decades, 44,000. The Army reached 61,000 new soldiers 4 months ahead of schedule. All 4 branches have hit their recruitment goals. So it's amazing. And I think you've seen, Pete Hegseth, and I know you have thoughts about what he's attempting to do in terms of the rules for journalists in the Pentagon. But in terms of changing the culture of the organization he leads, people that they're trying to recruit have responded incredibly positively to that.
Absolutely. And so you have the same thing going on in the Secret Service. You have senior agents, and I'm not going to just say red-blooded American males. We want female law enforcement that are up to the challenge and who can perform at that very high zero-fail mission level. So this is happening. I'm getting numerous sources have told me time and time again that recruitment has been a problem since Cartagena. So since a prostitution scandal that was pretty well known back in 2012, but that all got exacerbated after.
Well, Susan, just quickly, since let's assume everybody, just on the off chance that if you listen to this podcast, you might not excel at the category of prostitution scandals in the Secret Service in the 2010s, you know? So remind people briefly what happened in Cartagena and why do you think that was such a pivotal moment?
Yeah, because so the Secret Service agents, there were several of them that got caught. I guess in Colombia, it is legal to have prostitution is legal, and so they were down there for an advance trip for President Obama. So the president wasn't there, but they were caught with prostitutes, and a supervisor, female supervisor, rounded them up, and it got leaked to the press. And that's how I was told that if it didn't get leaked, it would probably have been all kept under the rug, and those agents still would be on staff, still be employed. But it all exploded around 2012 out into the media and became a huge scandal. It was this mentality of rings off, wheels up, rings off was the whole. Back then, it was this boys' club that was the problem.
So there you go. So the 31st, hey, it's one of my favorite phrases, Susan. Today's problems are yesterday's solutions. The solution was let's get rid of all these skirt chasing dudes. Let's bring some more women in there. But now we have a DEI culture and we've got some other problems. And so it's interesting. You've covered this for a long time that you see that as a sea change in terms of affecting the culture. And that's led us to where we are today. One other incident we didn't mention, or you didn't mention, in terms of high profile potential Secret Service failures that people are, I think, rightfully concerned about. We've got a video here. We'll play this. And so if you can either hear the audio, if you're watching this on YouTube, which we hope you are, you will see the video. But what are people about to see, Susan? What's this video?
Well, this was when President Trump decided to go out for the first time and show that DC was very safe and that even the president could go out and sit down in a restaurant. It was a failure on the Secret Service part because protests, Code Pink protesters, we know them very well because they interrupt congressional hearings all the time for decades. But they showed up at the same restaurant, and they were actually in there before Trump was seated, and they confronted him and started yelling epithets and calling him modern day Hitler. And it took an awful long time for the Secret Service to react.
It's true. Watch this. This is insane. Look at and it's just this weird moment with Donald Trump just standing there, as we're about to see.
Trump, you are not welcome here. Yes, he is. Trump is the Hitler of our time. Free DC. Free Palestine. Trump is the Hitler of our time. Free DC. Free Palestine.
It's so odd. Everything feels differently after the Charlie Kirk assassination, Susan, but just the idea of people kind of espousing that rhetoric, that proximity to the president, especially when you consider there have been 2 previous attempts on his life, very troubling. So that's yet another incident. So I guess we're going to talk to Marsha Blackburn and ask her what she thinks. She's been a force for accountability on this. But I guess big picture, how widespread is the concern? Is this something that more than just you and Senator Blackburn are raising? Do people at the highest levels think that they may have a Department of War-like overhaul?
Well, it's interesting because even before the assassination attempts last year, my reporting about a woman agent who had a mental breakdown at Joint Base Andrews had launched an investigation into DEI vetting at the Secret Service from James Comer and the House Oversight Committee. So that was 2.5 months before we saw it the problems really manifest itself in the assassination attempt. We have a Secret Service agent, Rashid Ellis, who has come forward saying that he believes that the Butler assassination attempt was 100% related to DEI mispriorities in the Secret Service. And he has a lawsuit that is moving forward, and the Secret Service is going to be facing that and see what happens there. I'm keeping a close watch on that.
So we will talk about that. Plus, as you may know, there's a government shutdown going on right now. So we're going to talk to Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee about that. The government shutdown, unfortunately, also impacted our Zoom. So Marsha Blackburn is going to be joining us audio only. So if you're listening, you won't tell the difference. But if you're watching this, you're going to see just a picture of her. And watching Susan and I very intently and attentively reacting is a kind of active listener posture. It's always important. We're going to do that with her. And so here's our interview with Senator Blackburn right now. And we are so excited to be joined now by someone that has worked alongside Susan to do incredible work and in helping to make the people that run this country safer. She's been one of the leading voices in investigating some of the failures of the Secret Service alongside Susan Crabtree. Senator Marsha Blackburn joins us from Tennessee. Susan, you love having Senator Blackburn here because when you write a story, you get to see immediate follow-up from her office, don't you?
That's exactly right. She has been one of the most aggressive and concerned senators since the Butler fallout from the assassination attempt against President Trump. And today we'd like to focus on some of the ongoing issues that the Secret Service is unfortunately facing. I've been writing about some incidents. One was an overweight officer falling asleep at the UN General Assembly recently. He also left his firearm, fully automatic firearm, unattended while he went to the bathroom. There was 2 women outside of President Obama's residence in DC who got into a terrible cat fight earlier this year. And of course, there was this agent who celebrated Charlie Kirk's assassination while also advocating for DEI on his Facebook post. And Senator Blackburn was instrumental. After I put that out on X.com, she immediately wrote a letter to the Secret Service asking for that agent to be fired immediately. So we wanted to ask the senator what you think of the state of DEI in the Secret Service right now, considering these incidents, a number of incidents this year, and does it need Hegseth-like reforms that we've seen at the Department of War?
Susan, I appreciate the way you are continuing to bring these issues to light. I think it's important to look, first of all, at the mission of the Secret Service. Now, they are there for protectees and protective service. And there is a finite number of people, the president's family, and cabinet, and those are the designated protectees. We know it's not that large a number now. That is their job, first and foremost, to make certain that they're safe. What we do know is that Kim Cheadle and her chief of staff, Dolan, had this program that was 30 by 30. And they wanted to have 30% of the officers be female by the time we hit 30-30. Now, if that is going to be your goal and you're taking your eye off of your core mission, which is to protect individuals, and then you are no longer meeting your prescribed mission. This is how you end up getting ineffectiveness into agencies. And we see it in agency after agency, whether it's protection with the Secret Service, or whether it is tariffs and trades with the Department of Commerce, whether it is the judiciary and people saying, well, we need to have certain members on the judiciary, and then you end up with judges that have no experience. The American people are tired of this, whether it's DEI, ESG, or any of these other initiatives. They want government to do their job. And with the Secret Service, it is to protect these individuals who face constant threats.
Yep. So did you, I told your staff that yesterday that I found out that Keo Dolan, who you just mentioned, was Cheadle's chief of staff, just got a big promotion at the Secret Service. She was one of the people in charge of that 30 by 30 program that you mentioned. Now she's in charge of the entire field operations, which is a 3,000 member department at the Secret Service. What do you make of this promotion and what Sean Kern is doing to address DEI at the Secret Service?
I think that anybody who was connected in any way with the failures at Butler, Pennsylvania, and endangering President Trump and the individuals the citizens who were attending that rally, they should be fired. And they had such a massive failure that day. And it is just God's goodness and blessing that President Trump came away from that day and was able to survive that attack. So I have a lot of questions around why someone who was connected to that and to Kim Cheadle's massive failures, not only in leading the FBI, but Susan, just her lack of concern over what happened out of that field office and in Butler, Pennsylvania. And they are to be there to protect President Trump. And if they are not going to do their job, then get them out of the way and put somebody in the position who is going to be there to protect the president.
Yes, and we do have some trans bathrooms that have been installed. There's trans agents in the Secret Service. Now, Pete Hegseth said that's not going to happen under his new DEI policies and raising the standards at the Department of War. What do you make of this? Also, these trans agents are in women's locker rooms at DHS.
And one of the things that I would say to that, I really appreciated the way Hegseth, as the Secretary of War, said, look, there are certain requirements. You have to be physically fit. You have to be able to meet the fitness requirements. And then there will be no DEI. There is not going to be any of the men and women's spaces or women and men's spaces. And his clarity on that, I think, has been very helpful to the military. We have so many veterans in our state. We're one of the highest veteran populations of any state. And Susan, as I am out and about and meeting with Tennesseans, I hear from them their appreciation for a sense of clarity, for an appreciation for drawing these distinctions, for people working to the mission, for their agency or the military. Which is as they want to see that entity that is working to the task. And all of these individuals are being paid with taxpayer money. And taxpayers want to see efficiency and they want to see results.
Essentially, what you're talking about, Senator Blackburn, is succeeding on the merits. And I just would point out that you're a senator and Susan's a journalist, and you're two females who are succeeding because of your merit in fields that have previously been dominated by men. So I think it's worth noting that you can rightfully criticize initiatives like 30 by 30. Quickly, we want to respect your time, but we are speaking to you in the middle of a government shutdown. Just want to get the latest from your perspective. What do you expect to happen? And is there anything that you feel pressured by as a member of the ruling party to do to try to bring Democrats to the table?
The Democrats had the opportunity to vote for a clean CR. This is just a continuation of spending levels they have voted for not once or twice, but 5 times in the past. And it is to allow us to finish the appropriations process. That will get us on a Republican or Trump budget and off of a Biden bloated COVID era budget. It's important for us to do. And of course, the Democrats have said they are not coming to the table until after they get these No Kings rallies, these big leftist Lollapaloozas done this weekend. And their big one is in DC on Saturday. And of course, we think next Monday they'll come there. I think that this week we will not get 60 votes for anything to proceed. I think we're a week away from that. It is, in my opinion, shameful actions on behalf of the Democrats who are just absolutely refusing. These are their budget numbers. They voted for this as recently as March. They voted for this last December, and you just want to say, what point do you think you are proving? Because it is hurting federal employees. And for Democrats to be so callous, as one aide to say, they're not doing anything until planes start to fall out of the sky. How disrespectful of the American people that they are there to represent.
She's been great at leading the charge on accountability within the Secret Service. She's great at creating phrases like leftist Lollapaloozas. We'll see how good she is at forecasting the future, and we'll see if this thing comes to an end next week. As she said, Senator Blackburn from Tennessee, thank you so much for joining us and being on background with us on this podcast. Thank you.
So you can see from Senator Blackburn's comments, it's not an isolated, our concerns aren't isolated that we have about DEI and the Secret Service. This is reaching the top level of government. People are deeply concerned that there was misplaced priorities and that Sean Curran inherited mess. And we hope that he's doing things. I do have hope that he is doing things behind the scenes to fix this and improving recruiting, but have yet to see very specific things out of his office. In fact, we are hearing more and more stories. One is about a trans agent who actually is not living up to her the standards of her colleagues for physical fitness. She's not meeting those standards. She actually was a trans agent who is biological female who's transitioning to male. And so that just creates more sort of morale issues in the Secret Service and deep concern.
Yeah, it's interesting, Susan, just the parallels with the military and what's been done there. Of course, Donald Trump implemented, revoked the permission for trans people to serve in the military, and that was controversial at the time. But some people would point to that as being helpful for the recruiting efforts largely. It's also worth pointing out that it's not just the military that has had issues with recruitment and the Secret Service, but police forces across the country. There's a national study that says of all the people that responded to a survey, they're operating on average at a 10% deficiency. So at most 90% of capacity. Of course, we've seen police shortages in Baltimore. They have 500 vacancies. New York's they're supposed to have about 40,000. They had that in 2000. They're down to 34,000. They're expecting to see a big wave of retirees in the future. San Francisco's down 500 officers. So you see shortages across the country. That's relevant to the discussion that Donald Trump wants to have about law and order. But it's the other piece of it, as you're noting, is it's not just about enforcing the law. It's about, can you recruit people, because are your priorities in the right places? And it doesn't sound like the Secret Services have been. So hopefully your reporting continues to bring a focus on this and we see some improvement in this incredibly important area.
Well, I would hope so. I do believe they're working on it, and I am told they are. But this is just, I think that when you're talking about police departments, you also have to think about the soft on crime liberal policies that are very similar to the woke policies Biden was pushing on the Secret Service during his time in office. The suffering goes both sides. It's not a merit-based, effective way to protect communities and our continuity of government. So there's still so many answers, and I hope to stay on the case and provide you with some answers in the future.
Well, we will stay on the case. Absolutely. Susan Crabtree. That's what this podcast exists for. That's why we at the Government Accountability Institute, we're so happy to help launch it with you. So if you're on the case, we're on the air. And so thank you very much, the people that have found us so far. And this only our second episode. We did bring you an interview with the United States Senator. So we're trying to bring something to the table. In addition to Susan Crabtree, I'm Eric Eggers. Thank you so much for being on Background with us. Please like and subscribe this podcast wherever you get your content. Thanks so much. Until next time.